Hello again, and welcome to our part 2 of this What's New webinar. We are ready to continue showing you what's new in SOLIDWORKS 2021. For those of you who are new in this session, my name is Lars, and by my side I got Irene. Okay, so let's start.
Yep. So let's have a look at the enhancements within parts. SOLIDWORKS 2021 introduces many improvements to expand the already robust options we have when working with parts. So let's focus on the parts we're going to look at to illustrate the enhancements within sheet metal, development, structure system, and custom properties. So I'm going to start by opening this bracket and look at some sheet metal enhancements. We have long been able to have edge flanges on curved face such as this fillet, but we have been limited to having them only from those that are originated from planar faces. Now in SOLIDWORKS 2021, we are able to create edge flanges also on curved geometry such as in the bend area. And as we can see, following closest to part on the preview, and we have all the available tools to adjust the angle, length, and flange position. This flange looks great and gives extra strength to this bracket. And of course, it can be flattened to further detail or export to DXF for fabrication. This kind of edge flanges is great for structural integrity, but also to use on enclosures such as this, where it needs to protect the internal parts. So I have all of the editing capacities available, quite soon at least. So I can easily flip the direction and adjust the angle to better protect my internal components, this part. So the new edge flange looks great and is a really good enhancement that we're able to do edge flanges from nonlinear faces to get more stiffness and such. Next we're going to look at is some of the enhancement in weldments. And working with weldments, we often use members of different sizes, such as here where we have the horizontal as 2x2 rectangular tubes and the vertical as 3x2 rectangular tubes. The trim extend tool is used to tell how these are going to trim to each other, and to use the embed trim trims one to the other, or we can use the middle trim to get an equal angle trim between them. But this hasn't given the right results, as we can see when we have different profiles. The new flush trim, however, gives a really nice and good desirable results for this by trimming them, as in the name, flush to each other. And since the rest of the component is created by mirror, they are automatically updated. This structure is going to be painted, so let's put on some appearance to show this. In SOLIDWORKS, I have a lot of different appearance to choose from, and I can also use the color grade to modify it further. New in SOLIDWORKS 2021 is that I can now use this dropper icon outside of the SOLIDWORKS window to apply color. So here I have our homepage, PLM Group homepage open in the background. I can grab my color picker and drag it. There we go. Let's see if it works this time. So there we go. So I can drag it to the color I want to apply, and then I can mark it and click OK. For these beams, I want a different color, so I can mark them and use the dropper again to choose the nice orange color we have in our support banner. If I click update now, the color is applied to all of the beams in the mirror pattern. Yes. Custom properties is a great way to store information about a document, such as the description, creation date, materials, etc. And these can be used to automatically populate PDM, drawing sheets, etc. But often these needs to be calculated. And finally, in 2021, we can now use equation as custom property type. So for this one, I'm going to calculate the total cost. And when I have equation as the type, I get access to global variables, functions, and properties. So here I'm going to use the global variable estimated finish cost and multiply it by the mass of the part. And I can see I get a total cost of $428.60. These custom properties can also be used for cut list properties or equation. Yes, last we're going to look at is structure system. Structure system was a great new enhancement in 2019 and is a really good way when working with larger structure systems. So we're going to start by creating a new structure system, and we're going to create some primer members on the 4 lines that we have here. When I go to profile, I can choose which one. This is already defined from the previous in mine, and I can choose pierce point and orientation. New in SOLIDWORKS 2021 is that I now have a graphic manipulator to adjust where I want my beams. For the first one, I'm going to change to top left corner as the pierce point, and I click OK. As we can see, this is not the optimal position for the other beams. And by clicking one of them, I can reorientate them individually. So for this one, I'm going to select a different pierce point. And okay. This one needs to be mirrored. And instead of having to do this in the property manager, I can easily click the axis it's going to be mirrored about, in this case, the Y. Finish. The last one is going to be rotated 180 degrees, and I can do that by using the graphics manipulator. Drag it around, and as I can see, the value is updated in the property manager. When I exit the structure system, I get the corner management, which does a really good job on trimming it to already existing members. Yeah, so that was the news within parts that we're going to look at today.
Okay, we are going to switch to a little bit more about assemblies. And I'm just going to open a little assembly here. This is our full product. The different functions that you have available when working with assemblies in SOLIDWORKS, they are there to basically help you to do your job as effectively as possible. As always, 2021 comes with further improvements that lets you get easier access to your data and work more effectively. So this assembly that we're opening up here has a couple of thousand components. We are opening it lightweight. As you can see, it opens quite fast, and it doesn't really take this long, even if I have a computer which is like 3 years old. It's a portable computer. And if you have a more modern, recent PC, it will be even quicker probably. But no matter what PC that you have, you will be able to start your work quicker than ever. And the bigger your assembly is, the bigger your gain is from this improvement. And the improvement is that SOLIDWORKS 2021 opens assemblies much faster than it used to. So we are opening this this assembly lightweight, and the new thing about lightweight components, just a couple of notes about lightweight. If you're not familiar with lightweight mode, it's a setting in SOLIDWORKS that you can apply to assemblies that basically just loads a subset of the sub-assemblies, meaning that there are no features visible within under the part nodes. And basically, what comes in from lightweight components is just graphic bodies, planes, and mates. So you can mate lightweight components to each other, but you cannot really make any design changes before you resolve them. Resolve, which is the opposite of lightweight. In 2021, if I go to one of these folders here, I can see that there are several lightweight components, and if I now expand one of these lightweight components, you can now see that it loads fully resolved. So this is a new thing in 2021. So when I decide to work with, if I want to make a design change, I just expand whatever lightweight component I need to work with, and it will be fully resolved, and I can start working with it. If you regret yourself and want to go back, you can at any time just right-click a component and press set it to lightweight again. I was a little bit outside my script here, but that's that's just fine, I guess. So we are going to open a sub-assembly here, and I think it's this one here. So just open that in its own window. Another thing which is new in 2021 is that it's faster to switch between configurations. So even if those configurations, they are not they're not rebuilt, as you can see, there are no check mark on it. It's quite fast to switch between the configurations, and also even faster when all the configurations are rebuilt like this. Very nice improvement in 2021 there. We will make this subassembly fully resolved, because what I'm going to do now is to open up the performance evaluation window. Whenever you work with assemblies and make design changes, it's quite common to use external references. They are there to sort of it's also a help to make you work faster, because a change that you do in one place will propagate to another place. So but what you can end up with if you work like that and have external references is that those references they are going in a circle and create circular references. What you can do now in 2021 is to, under the performance evaluation window, you can actually search up those references, and then you can see under rebuild performance that you have a warning about these circular references, and then you can click the warning and try to see where this circular references is. So a circular reference is basically that A refers to B and B refers to A. So the bad thing about circular references is that it can really slow down the rebuild time of your assemblies and sort of make the assembly perform not so well. So you want to edit those references. So that's what we are going to do now. So this warning is pointing towards a specific feature in my within some of the parts in my assembly. So I'll just exit the performance evaluation window, and just to focus in on this area, I will just isolate these components to get a clearer view of what I'm dealing with here. And these holes here, they are made by a little hole wizard feature, and I can edit this feature. And what I'm going to do is to change some of the sketch references, the sketch relations. Those sketch relations here, they are referencing to something outside of the part, as you can see here. And what I'm going to do is just to delete those references, and instead of applying the references like that, I'm going to apply dimension to the points here, and basically just ensure that the placement of the holes is made according to the part itself and not anything outside the part. All right, so I'll just make some simple like this. So now, if I just if I now go into performance evaluation again, I can see that under rebuild performance, I have no circular references. So that's it for circular references. Very nice improvement. And yeah. All right. We are going to see a couple of news about the feature. And if you're not familiar with the feature lets you create a simplified version of your part or your assembly, or simplified in the sense that you can do it to sort of hide sensitive information from the model before you publish the model or share a model with customers, for instance. It can also be used to make simplified versions of geometry, so that the assembly that contains the geometry is performing better. So the new thing about the feature in 2021 is, I think, is actually quite huge improvement, and is that you can now make the defeatured version of the file its own configuration with in the same file. So to just show you a little bit about that, I'll just make a quick defeature version. Making the defeature component itself is not really new, so I'll just sort of race through this. And if you have used defeature, you probably know that when you start selecting the different simplifying rules on your subassembly, you will get the preview on the right here, and then the full version of the assembly on the left. So what I'm going to do here is just basically, I think I can choose, for instance, cylinder on this one, and you can choose bodies here, and you can also choose entire sub-assemblies actually. So if I just, let's see here, if I do like this, you can select this entire sub-assembly. And add and use different rules basically on how you want the simplified version to look, how it's supposed to interpret the geometry. So just to go towards the end here, let's say that you want to include those two brackets, but you don't need to simplify them. Let's say that they could be bought items, so they are not subject to any sensitive information or anything, so they can just be added as they are. So then you can just copy the geometry, do like this, and then you have the simplified version here. So if I just go to the next step here, I can now choose to create this as a new configuration within this this assembly file, like this. And if I now press OK, I will have this information available as a configuration. It's going to be a derived configuration underneath this one. So I can at any time go back to the full version by just switching the configuration. And if I want to, I can, if I want to create a simplified top-level assembly, I can let this defeatured configuration be the visible configuration in the assembly. And as you probably know, on the top-level assembly, you can nest configurations. So from the top-level assembly, you can decide what sub-assembly configuration you can have visible in top level. So by one click in the top-level assembly, you can make a simplified version of a large top-level assembly, which is a very nice new addition to SOLIDWORKS 2021. And that's it for what I'm going to show you live. I think we'll switch back to the PowerPoint to show you a couple of new improvements that are best shown using video. And the first, there are some new improvements to how the graphics is drawn on the screen, basically. And these news are all making it more smooth to sort of interact with models on the screen. So the first improvement is called something which is called graphics performance. It's a setting that was introduced in SOLIDWORKS 2019, I think it was, and this is now enabled by default in SOLIDWORKS 2021. And basically, SOLIDWORKS has rewritten the code that is used to show graphics on screen, where there are some performance gains with the newer graphics cards. So as you can see here, there's a macro that rotates this model a couple of hundred times, and as you can see on the left, you will have a lot of there's a big improvement on how long time it takes to rotate the assembly. The next improvement is that edges on your model is now calculated by the graphics card instead of the CPU. So whenever edges are visible, like for instance, hidden lines visible, hidden lines removed, shaded with edges, those edges, the workload of displaying those edges correctly are made by the graphics card. And the last thing is that it's a little bit subtle change, I would say, but something which is called occlusion culling. It's the fact that when you rotate something, then the parts that you don't see, which are sort of occluded by the model, they are shown in a very rough version, graphic-wise. And first, when you release the mouse button after a rotate, the components will get their full resolution back. It's called occlusion culling. It's there in 2021, and it will make it will give you a smoother experience when you rotate the model on the screen. Okay, so that were the news in assemblies in SOLIDWORKS 2021.
Thank you. So let's have a look at the news in MBD, our model-based definition. So SOLIDWORKS MBD is an integrated alternative to creating 2D drawings, which helps you define, organize, and publish 3D product manufacturing information, also known as PMI, into industry standard formats. So 3D views is a great way to organize these views for different steps in the production line by capturing the different orientations and desired datums. Datum targets, which is now available in SOLIDWORKS MBD 2021, is a great way to show where other parts or fixtures are going to be in contact with this component. Let's create our own on the right side of the part. The first click shows the reference frame, which in this case is datum A. The second places the target, and the third places its balloon. These targets can be displayed as points, rectangles, or circles. And in this case, we're going to make a 1/4" circle. We can use locating dimensions to show where this datum target should be, and I'm going to make it 1 inch from the right edge. And I'm going to make it 1.75 inch from the flange at the bottom, which is datum B. And now I have a fully resolved datum target, fully defined, sorry. Next up, we have flat pattern view. Flat pattern view have been available in MBD for a long time, but we have needed to have the bend table in the view to get that information out. New in SOLIDWORKS MBD 2021 is that now when I export my 3D PDF, I can get the bend table in a tabular format in the same way that bill of materials have been before. So here I'm just going to capture all my 3D views. In the custom property field, I can see which data are collected from the part. Bend table allows me to choose if I have different tables and which information to include. And I can also include a step 242 file and add the DXF of my flat pattern part. And when this is all done publishing, it's going to look something like this. So here I can see I have all my information, I have the bend table, and I have the views that are easily changed, and I can also rotate the part within this graphics area. So that was the news within model-based definition. Let's have a look at some tips and tricks.
Let's have a look. Let's see here. All right, a couple of tips and tricks. If you want to set your model in a specific view and you want to sort of reuse that view, you can do that by using the space bar. Let's just place this model in the front view. If I want to orient my model in a specific view, I can sort of use the mouse keys, not mouse keys, the keyboard keys, the arrow, what are they called? The arrow buttons on my keyboard, and just rotate the model using those keys. With that view, I can save this view to, for instance, name. And what I can do with this is to access this view whenever I want to. And I can also access this view when I make a drawing out of this assembly. This is not a new function, and you're probably familiar with it, but if you're a new user, you might not be aware that this option actually works. And you can create several of these custom views that follows your model. Orienting the model is quite important, and as you probably know, you can use the normal to function to orient any face, any straight planar face towards you. I have a little normal to button that I have pulled to my heads-up toolbar here. So if I press that, I can see normal to this face. What you might not be familiar with is that you can actually click a second face. If I press this face, then I will orient the model a little bit differently. Still normal to this first selected face, but I will use the second selected face as an up direction when I orient the model. So this can be used to sort of force the model to be rotated exactly the way you want. Also, to orient the model, in some cases, it might be you might want to sort of rotate or move the model in relation to something else in the file. And for this, you can use Move with Triad, and you can rotate the model like this. If you hover the mouse over these lines in this ruler, you can have it rotated for in whole steps, and you can also pull the model along axis like this. This can be useful for a couple of things, but I think the most common thing to orient models is by mating. But prior to applying a mate, SOLIDWORKS often prefer that you orient the model close to the mated position before you mate, to sort of have the mate be applied exactly the way you want. So for this, you can also use the Move with Triad function. All right. The last thing we are going to look at is this transparent bolt here. If I click this transparent bolt, SOLIDWORKS will insist on selecting whatever is behind this transparent component. This is how SOLIDWORKS works by default. What you can do is to press the Shift button and then click the bolt, and then you can select the transparent graphics. Okay, so Shift Select makes you select transparent graphics. All right, I think that's it for tips and tricks so far. We are going to switch to Visualize, and I'm going to close this assembly here and switch to Visualize. So this is a rendering that I'm working with of one of the sub-assemblies. Looking really nice in Visualize, I would say. You have this very nice glow on some of the parts and some of the lights that are quite easy to achieve in Visualize, and add some drama and a very nice visual effect to my rendering. In Visualize, configurations from the SOLIDWORKS files are now readable. So if I press this model tab here, I can see that this top window here lets me select between different SOLIDWORKS configurations that comes from the SOLIDWORKS file. A very, very nice new addition, I would say. Another thing, if I let's say that I want to isolate a particular component. Let's say that I'm going to work with this component here. There is a nice improvement on how displacement mapping works. Displacement mapping is a way to apply texture so that you can see the sort of the topology that the texture creates. And what you can do now in 2021 is to, and I apply a little texture here. This part is going to be 3D printed, and I want to apply a texture that sort of makes the part looks like it's 3D printed. So this is I'm going to add a little image file that has this this layered look. So what I'm going to do is to add this as a displacement map. What you can see here now is this the polygons from the display data that comes from the SOLIDWORKS file. What you can do now in Visualize 2021 is to go to the texture mapping tab, and then you can increase the resolution on these polygons so that you can have much more detail in the texture than what you could before. So if we just wait a little bit now, we can see that it will now show us a very much better version of this texture. And I can refine this texture a lot more before I'm unsatisfied. But just to speed up things, I have a finished version of this texture. And if I zoom in, it's quite maybe a little bit difficult to see on the stream, but you can see that it has a very, very nice pattern here, 3D printed pattern. And just to finish off this texture, I can go to the texture mapping and just rotate the texture a little bit so that it's more in line with how the printer is going to produce this part with this way. So displacement mapping in Visualize 2021 much better. We are going to look at section view, and for this I'm going to change to a different configuration just to show you a little subset of the subassembly. And although section is not a new thing about Visualize, what is new is that we can now have the section face itself visible. I'm going to flip the section. So this is how it looks like prior to 2021. We are going to display the cut plane and apply a color to it. So as you can see, it adds a very nice possibility to really visualize how these components looks like on the inside, and also a nice addition to Visualize 2021. If you And now for an improvement which is exclusive to Visualize Professional, and that is that if you now render layers, rendering in layers is useful when you want to edit your final rendering in Photoshop, for instance. And you can use different layers to adjust the picture in Photoshop. This is a very common workflow for rendering professionals, I would say. So you have had support for rendering in layers all the way from earlier versions in Visualize. But now the new in 2021 is that you can render out all these layers in one go. So we don't have to do it in separate separate activities. Okay, and another improvement which I'm going to show on the PowerPoint is that you can now have a more schematic look, if you want, on your Visualize renderings. You have support now for toon shading, which will give you a little bit more conceptual look on your renderings if you prefer that. Sometimes you don't want a very polished and sort of photorealistic look, but you want a little bit more conceptual look. And then this toon shading will give you the possibility to have just that. So yeah, those are the news in Visualize 2021.
Great news. So let's have a look at the news in simulation. And to illustrate those news, we're going to have a look at how this corner mount assembly will behave. So if you look at the study 2021 study, we can see that there is a fixed hinge as fixture and a bearing load as load. If I look at different parts, I can see that my plates are of high quality mesh and that my hardware is of draft quality. This was an improvement last year, the ability to choose different qualities on the mesh for different components, which helps us get faster results with more focus on those that we are interested in. If I look at component interaction, previously known as component contact, I can see that I only have the global interaction, which is bonded. And for those of us that are familiar with the use of simulation, we know that this global contact only applies to those components that are initially touching. So to see how the relation is between this bolt and plate, I'm going to use interference detection. And I'm going to use treat coincident as interference, and I'm going to calculate. What I see is that I have no interference, meaning that these are not touching. And if I would investigate this further, I would see that I have a gap of 0.01 inch. I mentioned that the global bonding only acts on those that are initially in contact, but is it still like that? No, it's not. One of my favorite improvements this year is the gap range property in global contact. With this option, we can define a value that components within this should also be applied the global contact. And for contact, which previously was known as no penetration, we have a stabilization area as well. Last contact free is the one that was used to be allow penetration. To further show the advantage of this improvement within contact, I'm gonna compare the results of this 2021 and the zero gap study. And in zero gap study, it is set to be as it used to be, that the component has to be touching to be accounted for. So if I look at the compare and I zoom in on the bolts, we can clearly see the improvement here. On the zero gap study, I get a displacement that doesn't exist, and I also get wrong results. So this is going to save us a lot of time and a lot of investigation to find errors and to get the right results on geometry that's not even 100% optimized. So yeah, really great enhancements. Besides that, most of the improvements in simulation this year is under the hood. It is a lot in making the measure and the solvers faster and better. And in this, we have seen a even higher than 50% reduction in solver time for some large assemblies with a lot of contact. And of course, for those of you who may not notice it, it's an updated terminology to match conventional industry terminology. So that's the news in simulation.
And now for the news in Composer. A couple of news there as well. We are going to look at the first one. You can now, when you open SOLIDWORKS files, you can now choose which of the configurations that you want to open. And you can choose to open all the configurations or just one or two or three. You could open configurations from SOLIDWORKS files before also, but at opening time you had to choose between you had to choose one configuration basically. So now in 2021 is that you can choose several configurations, and you can switch quite easily between those configurations within the Composer file afterwards. So as in Visualize, Composer has now increased support for configurations, which is a very common tool to use in the SOLIDWORKS universe, I would say. So another new thing is that you can now adjust a little bit how you prefer to see selected objects. You have some settings there as well. And the next thing is that you can now save document properties to a file, either properties of the document that you have open or default document properties. And as you probably know, default document properties is a sort of a template that you have in Composer that decides how SOLIDWORKS files are going to look when you open them in Composer. So now by saving default document properties, you can sort of share settings between colleagues in your own company. And then you have several user interface and import improvements. Some of the interface elements are a little bit modernized, so to say. You have some import improvements in that it now takes shorter time to open SOLIDWORKS files. So quite nice improvements in Composer 2021. Okay.
Okay. So let's wrap this up with the last tips and tricks session, and we're going to look a bit at tips and tricks within Sketch. So first, I'm just going to close down my simulation, and then I'm going to open the tips and tricks Sketch. So when I create a new sketch, I prefer my orientation to be normal to the sketch plane. And if I create a sketch on the top plane now, I can see that it's not orienting. I have to do some extra by changing it in putting normal to, etc. to have this new. But if I want that to be something that is applied every time, I can go to my settings, and on the sketch I can select the auto rotate view normal to sketch plane on sketch creation. And another good enhancement in SOLIDWORKS 2021 is that this is on by default. I'm going to select that and exit, and I'm going to do a sketch on the front plane instead. And as you can see, it orients to it. Here I'm going to draw a line and a notch on that line. And to dimension this, I want to set the angle. Instead of having to create excessive construction geometry, I can use the center and the two endpoints to have an angle dimension on the arch. To get angle on the line, I select the line, one of the endpoints, and then the direction I want the angle to be dimensioned in. So when I'm done, I'm just going to use the D key again to exit my sketch. When I have multiple sketches and I want to be able to separate the geometry in the different ones, a good way is to use color. So by right-clicking, I can change sketch color, and I can choose one of them to be red, another one to be blue, and different for the rest if I'd like. First thing we're going to look at is what we can do when we have multiple geometry that we don't want in our sketch. So by editing this, I can select the tool Trim Entities. In Trim Entities, we have multiple options. We can use Power Trim, which allows me to click the mouse and then drag over those I want removed. Corner Trim trims those outside a corner that I'm picking. Trim away inside, I select to reference or border lines, and then I can trim those inside of those. Outside works in the same way, but it trims the outside instead. Trim to closest does exactly that. It trims to the closest meeting lines. So thank you for joining us today. Hopefully you know where to reach us if you have any further questions at any time. And I hope there has been some good news and tips and tricks for you today. Yep.
All right. Thank you for joining.